296 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 12 losses. The Flying Tiger's kill ratio is one of the most celebrated statistics in military history. What that ratio actually cost them is the horror the legend was built to hide. Payroll ledgers from Kunming tell a story at odds with the legend. Each man signed his name for a base salary of $600 a month, double what the Army offered, but with a catch: 500 more for every confirmed kill, paid in cash. The contracts were clear. These were not soldiers of the United States. They were civilian employees of the Chinese government, hired through the Central Aircraft Manufacturing Company. In exchange for the money, they resigned their commissions. 40 pages of resignation orders sit in the National Archives, each stamped with a date and a name, boys barely out of college, some just 19. The average pilot was 24, a few with as little as 200 hours in the air. Most had never seen combat, no rank, no uniform protection, and no Geneva Convention status. If captured, they would be tried as mercenaries or spies, not as prisoners of war. The payroll ledger lists the bonuses, but nothing for risk. One pilot wrote in his diary, "We were told we'd be paid for each plane we shot down, but if we were shot down ourselves, we were on our own." The voice on a scratchy recording years later said, "I knew what I was signing, but I didn't think about it until the first time I had to write my own resignation." These were not icons, not invulnerable aces, but young men gambling everything for a contract and a cause that left them legally exposed and, in the end, expendable. Their reward for bravery was a bonus check and a promise that if the worst happened, no government would come looking for them. The next morning, their P-40s would reveal how little that contract protected them. The P-40 Warhawk, painted with its famous shark mouth, looked the part of a predator, but its teeth were blunt where it mattered most. On paper, the Warhawk could reach 29,000 feet, 4,000 feet less than the Japanese Zero, and nearly 3,000 feet below the Ki-43 Oscar. In the thin air above the clouds, that gap was a death sentence. The P-40's Allison engine struggled in climbs, forcing pilots to attack from above or not at all. The Zero, lighter and more agile, could spiral upward at over 3,000 feet per minute. The Warhawk, barely 2/3 that speed, bled altitude in every turn. United States Army Air Force's technical orders spelled it out, and Chennault hammered it home in every briefing: never turn with a Zero. Pilots learned the rule the hard way. One recalled that if you tried to dogfight them, you were dead. We dove, we shot, we got out. The P-40's only real advantage was in a dive. Its heavy frame could pick up speed quickly, then zoom away before the lighter Japanese fighters could follow. Every engagement became a gamble, hit and run, or risk being caught in a turning fight you could not win. Performance charts passed hand to hand. In the Kunming mess hall told the story in numbers. At 20,000 feet, the Zero could still climb and turn circles around the P-40. The only hope was altitude and surprise. One pilot's diary entry scrawled in grease pencil read, "Stay high, dive hard, and don't look back." The Warhawk's limits were not just technical. They dictated every tactic, every heartbeat in the cockpit, and every nightmare that followed on the ground. The next challenge would come not from the sky, but from the earth below. Kunming's runway ran just over 7,500 feet, a battered stretch of earth and steel matting hammered by monsoon rain, and the boots of mechanics who worked until their hands bled. At Mingaladon, the airstrip was a muddy scar, barely 3,200 feet long, hemmed in by jungle and prone to flooding. Along the Yunnan-Burma border, airfields shrank to little more than clearings, sometimes just 2,000 feet from end to end. P-40s needed almost 3,000 feet to get airborne fully loaded. Pilots watched the tree line rush toward them, praying for lift before the jungle swallowed them whole. On the ground, the war was fought with wire, bamboo, and whatever could be salvaged from the last crash. Official manifests called for 28 parts kits each month, but the hump airlift delivered just 17 on average. Mechanics stripped radios, propellers, even landing gear from wrecked planes to keep the rest flying. When a prop hub cracked, they improvised with scavenged steel and local wood, binding them with wire and hope. One mechanic called it the Kunming solution. If you couldn't fix it, you made it up. Heat pressed down, pushing cockpit temperatures past 100 degrees. Mosquitoes bred in every puddle, carrying malaria that swept through the ranks. Medical logs from Kunming Hospital recorded 634 cases of malaria and 212 of dysentery between December 1941 and June 1942. For every man lost in the air, 3 more were grounded by fever or stomach cramps. As one ground crewman wrote, "It's not the Japanese that'll get us, it's the flies, the filth, and the heat." Sleep was a rumor. The men of the AVG lived on black coffee, adrenaline, and the hope that their nerves would hold until the next scramble. By the spring of 1942, the strain was everywhere, etched into the flight logs, scribbled in medical diaries, and muttered in the mess hall after midnight. 4 pilots, each with his own breaking point, refused to fly. The official record called it going yellow. The real story was hands that shook so badly they could not lace boots, eyes that stared through walls, voices that broke in the middle of a sentence. One pilot wrote that the Japanese planes chased him in his sleep. He woke up gasping, thinking he was still in the cockpit. Dr. R.H. Putnam, the AVG's lone medical officer, filled his monthly reports with quiet warnings. There was no mention of psychosis, but line after line documented fatigue, insomnia, and the slow unraveling of men pushed past endurance. He prescribed rest when he could, but the war did not wait for recovery. Sedatives, phenobarbital mostly, became the last resort. The disciplinary log lists the refusals, but not the nights when pilots lay awake sweating through nightmares, or the mornings when they swallowed a pill and climbed back into the cockpit anyway. In the final week of April 1942, the dam burst. 6 crashes in 7 days, none in combat, all on takeoff or landing. The accident reports mention engine failure, pilot error, and weather. They do not mention the hands that could not stop shaking or the men who had begged for relief. The only therapy was another mission, another chance to die. The myth says these were heroes. The record shows they were human and breaking. As the pressure mounted, the promises of support and protection began to dissolve one by one. On July 4th, 1942, a typed order signed in Kunming ended the American volunteer group. The promise of rest, 2 weeks leave before transfer, was printed in memos and spoken by Chenault himself. But the numbers in the administrative files tell a different story. Only 12 pilots actually received the leave they had been guaranteed. 38 were handed transfer papers and folded into the 23rd Fighter Group. Uniforms and ranks issued as if nothing had changed. 10 refused outright, walking away from the war machine that had chewed them up and now wanted them back on new terms. Their names, once celebrated, vanished from the official rolls. For those left behind, the abrupt transition meant more than a change of insignia. The per-kill bonus disappeared. The legal gray zone, so useful for Washington's deniability, became a bureaucratic dead end. When Robert Foster, one of the original Tigers, sued the War Department for unpaid bonuses and breach of contract, The court records show a quiet settlement. $7,500 to close the file, no admission of wrongdoing, no apology. The American volunteer group's final reward for 7 months of combat was an order, a handshake, and the sound of the myth machine starting up. One pilot wrote, "We were told we would be heroes. We were told we would be taken care of. In the end, we were just numbers on a list. The legend was safe, but the men were left to count the cost themselves." The legend was secured not by the pilots, but by the studios and press rooms thousands of miles away. In March 1942, Colonel Harold Miller's memorandum to the Warner Brothers production office spelled out the assignment. The film must celebrate the 20-to-1 kill ratio, erase any mention of cash bonuses, and portray the American volunteer group as pure volunteers, shielded by the American flag. The resulting script, stamped and approved by the War Department, became the backbone for John Wayne's Flying Tigers. By July, the film rolled out across 200 theaters, each screening accompanied by newsreels and posters quoting the same figure: 300 enemy planes downed for just 12 lost. Newspaper columns echoed the refrain, calling the Tigers the most successful fighter unit in history. Not a word about malaria, about pilots denied leave, or about the legal limbo that left them as expendable as their aircraft. Studio files show edits that cut references to contract disputes and psychological collapse. The press, fed by official releases, printed heroics and statistics, never the cost. One pilot, years later, clipped a headline from his hometown paper: "Our boys beat the odds." He wrote in the margin, "They never asked what it cost us." The myth machine did its work so thoroughly that the real story, the one written in payroll ledgers, hospital logs, and silent resignations, was buried beneath celluloid and newsprint. The public memory was set, but the ledger of suffering remained open, unacknowledged. Today, the legend stands spotless while the scars remain invisible. As war stories harden into national myth, the real toll, the trauma, the betrayal, the silence, gets buried with its witnesses. The cost is paid every time we mistake propaganda for memory. Not all victories leave heroes, some only survivors.